my father never liked me. He made a point of telling me whenever he could. He would sit down at the dinner table, break open a slab of steaming wheat bread, and if I waited too long to do the same, or took my bread too quickly, he would slant his mean, watery eyes and say,
"Eva, my girl, 2 days your dear mother was in labour with you. For you to come out with manners like a barn animal."
My mother's hand would twitch at the table, but no words would come out. My mum was never a talker. My mother was never anything less than perfect. I kept my mouth shut and my lips tight and tried to mimic her quiet dignity. When we walked down the street, there wasn't a person who wouldn't greet her on the way past, and she would only ever dip her head in that lolling, graceful way she always did. She kept her head held high through the whispers and questions of how a man like my father had married a woman like her. I was a wave in the ocean that she was. Make no mistake about it, I was beautiful. At 14, I'd skipped all of the heavy-set, earthy genetics of my father. I was quick too. In my class of 30, I'd never dipped below being in the top 5. In everything I did, I tried to emulate Mother, but she was not a woman who could be copied. Still, I trudged onwards through the upward current that was the insults of my father, and said nothing. What more did he want from me? What more could I be? My mother used all kinds of fun games to distract me from my father's painful attentions. One summer when I was 12, we learned Morse code and would scamper around the house like mice, tapping messages between the walls to each other. She was my best friend, someone I could get lost in tent forts with, someone who would show me how to bake fish pie better than the ones you could buy in the store. One night, after a particularly brutal tirade over my poor cooking, the situation worsened. Red-faced and bawling, he reached over the countertop and slapped me, clean in the face. I waited till my father went to bed. I sat on the kitchen table and cried. I wanted to be good enough. I wanted him to love me like a father loves his daughter. I couldn't let him see me anything less than composed, anything less than her. Then she appeared out of nowhere, her silvery hair almost translucent in the moonlight. My mother pulled out a chair to sit in and reached across the table to grasp my hand. Her skin felt feverishly damp. I noticed she was crying too, silent, ocean blue tears. I never knew tears could be that colour, and for some reason, it made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. "Why don't you leave him, Mama?" It wasn't a question. I didn't expect an answer. My mother looked up with her cheeks stained, and for a moment, something occurred to me. My mother hadn't spoken in a long time. I fought as hard as I could to remember a time where she had ever said a word, but I realised she hadn't. My brain felt cloudy, heavy, as if I was suddenly remembering something that I didn't want to remember. The sound of the ocean grew almost deafening, and my mother's freezing nails dug into my hand. The scratches. My skin. What had he done to her? I tried probing her for information, but after that night, she went back to her usual silent self. She busied herself with making my father's favourite pies, but only I would notice that she chopped apples in a certain ferocity she had never shown before. My father only got worse. I cleaned out the attic once to surprise him with a new space he could perhaps use as a den, and found a baby soft blanket that I took to sleeping with for the sheer comfort of it, reverting back to a second child. I grew withdrawn, nervous. I jumped at tiny noises, a car alarm, or a branch at the window. His rages were more violent and lasted longer. The bruises on me grew more noticeable. I started wearing turtlenecks, and my friends would joke about love bites as I struggled to cover the purple blossoming over my arms. The night I burned dinner was the last straw for my mother, I think. He took one mouthful, and I saw his cruel line of a mouth curl downwards in disdain. The lump of fear in my throat was almost choking me. I knew what was coming before it even started, and finally, I broke. Sobbing, I ran like a kicked dog away from his anger into my room, clutching the blanket that I had found in the attic as I heard the footsteps clunking up the stairs after me. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for the blows that never came. Instead, I opened my eyes to my father stare at me in abject horror.
Where did you find that?
He could barely get out the words as my mother dashed into the room hot on his tail. She must have been determined to stop him. My dear sweet mother. The look on her face when she saw the blanket reminded me of the look she had when she chopped apples. My father started crying, broken, heaving sobs.
Oh God, what have you done?
He moaned as he dropped to the floor, rocking like a child's toy. The gleam in my mother's eye had become feral as her mouth stretched open, further than a human should be able to stretch their mouth. The skin at the sides of her lips cracked as she came closer. Her spine snapped into an S shape as she grew too big for her body. She crawled into the blanket like a skin, and ate my father slowly, so he screamed for hours before she slipped back into the ocean without so much as a word. I hope you enjoyed this story, and until next time, be good. But if you can't be good, be careful.